from school, I then decided to apply to the furniture school at High Wycombe. So it's actually the Buckinghamshire College of Higher Education at the time. And they did a degree in furniture design and craftsmanship. So I did take a year out after school actually, and then ended up working on a fishing boat, bizarrely, for a little while. And then I ended up working for a furniture maker down here as well. So for a little while before I went to college. So yeah, then I spent 3 years at High Wycombe. From there, I then went to a little workshop in near Chipping Norton, a place called Chadlington, and worked for a company called Wayward, where there was just 4 of us in the company at the time, making hardwood, really sort of one-off bespoke hardwood furniture. A lot of traditional techniques, a lot, all traditional joints, a lot of sort of arts and crafts influence and stuff. Yeah, I'm very much inspired by the 2 guys that were working in the workshop with me, Clive Brooks and Sean Casey, who very much became sort of my mentors to me early on, and I still keep in contact with them now. And yeah, that was a really great sort of start for me, sort of straight out of college, to be able to go and work with people like that. The college was very much embedded in the arts and crafts style, so there's a lot of dovetails and through tenons and the real sort of lovely joinery that you sort of associate with that era. So I suppose, yeah, I was very much kind of at the beginning very much sort of drawn towards that sort of style very much. But I think as the years have progressed, I've sort of now become very much inspired by like Art Deco. But it's been quite an interesting journey, I think, because in the 30 years that I've been making furniture, which is roughly the sort of time that arts and crafts sort of morphed into Art Deco, I've kind of gone on quite a similar journey in a way, and almost in the sort of same time frame. And it hasn't been something that I've necessarily done it wasn't premeditated. It wasn't premeditated. It's just kind of happened that way, really, which I've sort of found it been quite interesting. I think my use of materials probably. So I use copper a lot in my work. So patinated copper. I did that right from the beginning actually at college. Well, my 3rd year piece, I sort of discovered the technique, and really, I don't know, it was nice because obviously copper has a massive part to play in Cornish history as well. And the vibrant colour that you get from patinating copper is sort of something that's quite unique. You don't seem to be able to get that colour from any other sort of source really. And the texture as well that you get. So then I've also used quite a lot of stone now. I've got a serpentine in my work, which is sort of inspired by a friend of mine who does a lot of work with serpentine. So slate was something that I used very early on as well. So I've always tried to incorporate sort of other materials into my work just to kind of give it a little bit of uniqueness. And I suppose that's definitely, the copper's definitely become my sort of stamp, if you like. The variety is amazing, what you can do with wood. Every piece of wood is different. Every species of timber works differently. You can make 2 bits of furniture that are almost identical out of 2 different types of wood, and they will look, they'll be very, very different because of the, just the whole sort of difference between the 2. I love working wood with hand tools as well. I probably do a lot more handwork than perhaps I should in terms of commercially viable. I probably sort of think like cutting a tenon, for example. I've got, I could cut it by hand, or I could sort of do it on a machine. Very often I will choose to do it by hand, purely because you're in a quiet space, you might have the radio on, you haven't got a machine blaring away, and whilst it might not necessarily be as obviously as quick, but the process is so much nicer using your hand tools, and I really enjoy that aspect of working with wood. It's just, yeah. Lots. No, that isn't true. No one's workshop's ever going to be big enough. That's just the way it is. But I think you've just got to be very mindful about what you do within your space. So if you're making huge wardrobes, for example, then obviously you're going to need a big workshop. But if you can just make, small items of furniture or smaller items, then you can get away with, a fairly sort of modest space, really. I mean, obviously machinery is the big thing. You do need a certain amount of machinery, which does require space. But then I've got a combination machine, which basically is a planer, saw, and spindle moulder, router table, sort of all in one. So that's a really good thing to have for a small workshop. It's not as efficient as having separate machines, but obviously you've got to work within the space that you've got. But so I think my advice to anyone would be to sort of tailor their what they do is tailor it to the space that you've got, and then you won't get too frustrated. I'm spread out over 3, so I've basically sort of built 3 different sheds over a period of years, and one of them is now classroom space, which because I run short courses from my workshop, teaching hand skills mainly. So it's all about using the plane and marking, cutting accurate joints, and so that's become a classroom. But I also use that as myself when the classes aren't happening. I have my main workshop has got the combination machine in it and my bench, and so that's my sort of main working area. And then I've also got a sort of wood store as well, but that's also got a planer thicknesser in it as well. So I've actually got and that's means that I can go and source my timber and get it prepped in that room before I then bring it back into the workshop. So it's not necessarily the most efficient use of space, but it's kind of how I've managed to make it all work, really. Quite often, like, no brief, so that sort of freedom of being able to go kind of what shall I make today sort of thing is really nice. And sometimes you just find a piece of timber that will sort of lead you into a certain way, a certain direction for a piece of furniture. But I'm making a lot of mirrors at the moment. I do a lot of mirrors, and they're nice because the format is sort of fairly similar, but there's such a huge array of different timbers and veneers and product and sort of materials that I use, like the copper and the stone. And so it's just be able to kind of like experiment by mixing your palette and on a mirror. I'm starting to, it's really enjoyable. I love that. Well, when I was early on, I tried, and I still do it to an extent. I try and look at as little furniture as possible, which might sound strange. I tried not to be influenced too much by what had been done before, but rather than to see what was in my head. Because ultimately, we know what a table looks like, and a chair looks like, and stuff, And I think if you sort of, so I tried to see what came out of my head as much as possible. But obviously, gradually, you look at loads of stuff, and you design things, and they sort of progress in their sort of style and construction. And it's more, so I think early on, probably the materials were my inspiration. And then gradually, I think I've sort of got into more inspiration by, like I was saying about the Art Deco. Obviously now I am looking at some sort of classic Art Deco sort of features and things, and bringing them into my work. So it's sort of a combination. I think there's a lot about furniture making and the designs that come out that are just in there. You don't really know where they come, but you are always being influenced by looking at things and furniture. Okay, so the better woodworker, there's that classic expression, a woodworker always blames his tools. But actually, buy good tools, buy fewer tools, but better tools. That would be one of my main tips. There's some really good quality tools out there now, probably as good as they've ever been, in terms of the, manufacturing, the engineering and all that, And so definitely that would be one of my top tips. And just go and learn with somebody. So come on a course. But I think just to get the real basics, because actually the majority of woodwork is the same. It's you know, if you can cut an accurate joint, then that's it. And so to learn those techniques from an expert is probably something that I'd really just go there, see how you do it. You'll pick up so much very, very quickly. And then it's really just practice. You go away and you just practice it. It doesn't take years to become a furniture maker or good at something. It just takes hours, really, of just perseverance on a particular skill. So, for example, one of my tips that I say to all my guys and students here is, you know, people come here and say, I can't saw straight, for example. Well, when it boils down to it, if you actually count up the amount of saw cuts that they've made in their lifetime, it's probably very, very few. And you could probably, in half an hour, just practice sawing and nothing else, you've probably done more saw cuts in that half an hour than you've actually done in your life. So when you say you can't saw, you know, it's really, and that's the key, I think. It's just to practice each individual little skill until you become confident with it, and then you just put it all together and away you go. So yeah, I think someone goes, well, I've been doing that for 30 years. You haven't. You've been doing it over a period of 30 years, but you've been, you know, each individual skill, actually, if you itemized it into each, you know, you've been doing it for hours, you know, like, you don't see what I mean. And so if you bear that in mind, shut yourself in a shed and just practice each individual skill, and then you'll find that you'll become competent quite quickly. I suppose there's lots actually. There's very popular tools now, Veritas tools that are made in Canada. Lie-Nielsen, which are an American company. You've got Clifton, they make really lovely planes, and they are a British company. So yeah, they're a very popular range. There's also a set of planes now, or a set of tools that are made in China called Quangsheng, and they're quite a good alternative to the higher end. They're still very, very good quality tools, but they're quite a good alternative to the higher end because they are expensive. I mean, you know, they are really expensive. Or the other thing, because I'm a massive advocate of the plane, so I've got quite a lot of planes, as you can probably see around the workshop, and I think to learn to use a plane is really, really important. And actually, you can get a fairly standard plane and tune it up to work incredibly well. It does take a bit of time. So the beauty of the good tools is you can unwrap them from the box and they're there. Whereas but I also advise to go and buy a tool from car boot sale or off eBay, or, you know, a nice sort of number 5.5 Stanley Bailey plane or something, and then spend time tuning it up, and then you get a good understanding of how the actual tool works as well. So by doing that, you've not only made the plane work a lot better, but you've also now got a good understanding about what you're trying to achieve out with that plane as well. And there's a lot of people who do get frustrated by the plane, and then they tend to ditch it, and then they tend to go to I'll clean it up with sandpaper. Now, I hardly use any sandpaper in my work. I try and minimize the amount of sandpaper I use. I hate sanding. It's boring, laborious, it's dusty, it's not very good for your health. And so if you can get shaving rather than just a cloud of dust, which is basically what you're getting off the plane, and getting the shaving off the plane, it's quick, your work remains flat and true, and actually I can achieve a better surface finish with the plane than you ever can with sandpaper. So yeah, I would advise anyone to go and spend some time to really get in tune with the plane. My one go-to, which is a bit of a luxury, is this is a Lie-Nielsen low angle jack plane, and I've had this now for about 25 years, and it is my go-to. It's like my favorite plane, and I just do all sorts with it, and it's incredibly well engineered. And yeah, if you can, there are alternatives to this one as well, like the Quangsheng do one, Veritas do one. But yeah, for me, if you can get one of these in your toolbox, then you'll really enjoy using it. It's a great piece. You know, less than £100, you can get a really good set of chisels. If you spend 30 quid, you're not going to get a decent set of chisels. And so it's it's not an enormous amount more money. And so that's quite important. There is quite a little jump between those two sort of figures. Just the quality of the metal, the way that the edge starts, the durability of the sharpening edge. Sharpening, that's another really important, going back to what we were saying earlier. If you can't sharpen your tools, you can't do woodwork at the end of the day. So sharpening is really, really important. It's just vital, because most tasks that people find difficult are actually because their tools aren't at their optimum sharpness. As soon as you can achieve optimum sharpness, then suddenly it just opens up this incredible kind of couple of decent planes. I'd recommend a number 5.5, which is quite a big, it's a big plane. It's this is a number 6. This is a number 6. It's slightly smaller. The number 6 is also a good all-round plane as well. And this is the Kwang Sing one. You can do anything then with it. You can flatten big tabletops with a plane, number 6, 5.5, whatever. It's still small enough to be able to do just general planing work. So I think that's a good one. And then to get like a block plane, a really nice block plane as well, which is something like this. This is the Veritas one. And that's a really essential tool. So yeah, so that's, and saws, obviously. And a lot of people are going over to Japanese saws. They seem to be getting more and more popular, and there's kind of saws now that are sort of based on the Japanese ethos, but they're slightly westernized, and they're really popular as well. And so yeah, a good hand saws. Right, so obviously you've got a massive colour palette with all different types of timber, how they work. So yeah, it's very much like choosing your timber which is appropriate to the design of your piece can be quite tricky, and some timbers completely work with a certain design, other timbers just don't lend themselves to a design. So it is quite interesting. Obviously there's the grain type. You've got fine grain timbers, open grain like oaks and ashes and elms, which are quite sort of big open grain, quite sort of loud timbers in a way, and they can be quite patterned. And then the piece of furniture kind of takes on the grain, takes on the look of the grain. But if you want the piece of furniture to be more about the shape and the form of the furniture itself, then you're going to need to use timbers that don't have that really strong grain patterns and stuff. So then you'd be sort of just finer grain timbers, maybe like maple. So there's been a real stigma about veneer, and I don't think that our no veneer and ear thing doesn't really help, because it's suggesting that anything that's got veneer on it is inferior to solid wood. And it couldn't be further from the truth, really, because veneer, it's sustainable, because if you've got a fantastic bald, trunk of timber, to turn that into veneer you get thousands of sheets of veneer out of it, as opposed to a few planks of solid timber. So it's much more environmentally sort of friendly as far as the tree is concerned, or the use of the tree is concerned, if you like. And it gives you an enormous colour palette as well, grain patterns. I mean, some of the veneers you can get are amazing. And also the veneer allows you to do things that you can't achieve with solid wood anyway, you know what I mean? Because solid wood moves, and it's always moving and, and expanding, contracting, doing what it's got to do. And so there's certain things that you just can't achieve with solid wood that you can achieve with veneer, and then gluing it obviously to a ply base or whatever. So yeah, so veneers open up a whole new world to you, really. And I'm starting to use more and more veneers these days, purely for that reason, because I'm loving the sort of formality of what you can achieve with that. You can, book matching, so you can have both sides both sides of a door or whatever can have completely book matched panels. And I mean, the mirrors, I've started to use a bit more veneer on the mirrors now. And again, both sides can equal each other and the top. So it's really, really good. You can balance things really well. And that's probably going back to what we said earlier about those really strong grain patterns in the timber. When you've got that, you've got to be really careful how you balance the grain patterns within your piece of furniture, because if you get it all wrong, the furniture can look like it can almost look like it's squiffy. And so, yeah, with veneer, you've got that real lovely formality you can achieve. Modern, like, domestic houses now, with underfloor heating and all that sort of thing, they're the bugbear of solid furniture. Because if your timber isn't really, really dry, and a lot of workshops, people working, they kind of, they're not necessarily like the same environment as a house, So as soon as you take that piece of furniture into a house with underfloor heating and stuff, it can be a bit of a nightmare. It's kind of a bit of a furniture maker's curse, really. So, of course, veneer-based and board-based products completely, counteract that, so you haven't got that issue. Mm. I do like native timbers. If I had to choose one, I'd probably say elm. I do love elm. It's really, it's got it's one of the stronger grain patterns. It bends well, so you can steam bend it really nicely. It's got really good sort of structural qualities, so it's often used for chair seats and stuff because it doesn't split. The sort of traditional Windsor chairs and stuff and all that kind of thing. Yeah, elm's a nice one, and it has got an amazing colour range with lots of greens. Particularly there's a species called witch elm, which has a lot of greens and really varied colours into it, which is lovely. My top woodworking tip would be learn to use a plane properly. I think that once you get to grips with that, you'll never look back. Not only is it really efficient but it's also incredibly therapeutic as well when you get good shaving coming off your plane. And my other top tip is to measure as little as possible. Okay, if you make a mistake, it's more often than not you've cut something to the wrong length. Gone away with a number in your head. Somehow made a mistake or read the tape wrong or whatever. So my advice would be to mark as much as you can off your work. So offer something up and make a mark to where you want it to go, instead of measuring it and then going away and cutting it. Just get the piece, mark it off, and then you'll make less mistakes. I think all my biggest mistakes have been from measuring, I would say.